2023. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming, especially to all of you firefighters, EMS personnel. The meeting can be seen on Spectrum Cable TV channel 1303, and it is also streamed on YouTube, the town channel. The first item on tonight's agenda is the introduction for fire and EMS studies and plans.
Do you want to go and I'll fill in?
Chief, do you want to take it away?
So, sure. 2015, Knox County had a study conducted. I think it was at the request of several towns. So Neil Courtney, who is a retired firefighter from New Hampshire, he actually owned the town motel in here for years. He actually lives in town. Did the study for the county. I think Audra gave all of you that. Neil is currently in the process of updating that study. Several towns asked Knox County to have it updated, so Neil's in the process of updating that. Should be out in winter 2024. There are a number of recommendations in Neil's report that we certainly implemented some of those. One of them was the last truck we purchased, Engine 6. One of Neil's recommendations was to look at a government consortium purchasing process. So, which is actually what we did. We actually just pulled a spec off from, it's actually the Oregon League of Cities that posted it, and that sped the process up. We didn't have to sit down and write specs, and it got a much better price because it was specs that were bid on by a number of manufacturers around the country, and so came in at a better price. So that was one of the recommendations that Neil put in. The four towns had Kevin McGinnis and others, Tom Judge, do an EMS study along with the hospital. And that's kind of what started us to do first response. That report said that one of the towns should start providing EMS and expand the license from there, and ideally spread it out to the other four towns. So as you know, when we met in August, we're in the process of, when we renew our license next month, adding Hope geographically to that area. So that's kind of those studies, that are local studies that we've had. And in my mind, this is billed as a EMS workshop, but in my mind, this is really a fire department and EMS workshop. Audra and I spent some time with Chris on last week chatting about the fire department. And I'll just give you a snapshot. I hate talking about the numbers of firefighters because it is such a variable, but in the snapshot that I gave to Chris, there are 26 of us. 4 of us, it's our job. Myself, Andrew, Matt, and Jack. The others in the room are part-time on-call firefighters. So if you take that 26, you subtract the 4 of us from that, you got 22. 5 of those 22, I'm going to call them support people. 2 of them, if you combine their years of service, is over a century of service. It's awesome that we still have them involved, but you can imagine that we probably don't get a whole lot of practical muscle out of them. And so out of those 5, that's 2 of them. The other 2 are these 2 gentlemen here who are sophomores at the high school. And there's a history of the Camden Fire Department having junior firefighters. Andrew started off that way. So then we take away those 5. We have 3 EMS only folks who got involved when we were doing EMS. Jody and Linda are 2 of them. So then we're down to 14 on-call firefighters. And the rule of thumb is that we can rely on 1/3 of them at any time. So 6. And in actuality, we had a conversation. TC reminded me that we had a conversation several years ago in the select board that when I was talking about the issue of on-call firefighters and have enough of them, that I compel the on-call firefighters to respond to incidents. I can't compel them to do that. They're part-time on-call employees. We can create an environment, an atmosphere that wants them to show up, but I can't compel them to show up. So really, this is more about staffing the fire department and how we do that. For at least 10 years, I've been writing in our annual report that the old generation's old model of staffing the fire department with part-time on-call firefighters is on the way out. It's been on the way out. When I first went to leadership classes at the National Fire Academy in the early 90s, that was a topic then. This is not a Camden problem. This isn't a Knox County problem. It's exacerbated in Knox County, but this is a nationwide problem. The numbers I think that we chatted with Chris about was, I think, 2,000, the NFPA, which stockpiles data about fire service, 860,000 volunteer firefighters across the country, 2020, 675,000. So a 25% reduction in on-call firefighters across the country. We're experiencing the same problem, and we're going to need to staff more full-time people at the department. We're going to need to start staffing overnight. We had a call a couple of weeks ago at 2:00 in the morning, and it was myself, Earl, and Todd Anderson who responded to the call. That's 3 people. 3. And Todd, Earl, and I are the same age. We're probably leaving the department at the same time within the next several years. And we are concerned about who is taking over after we leave. The 3 of us are the tail end of the baby boomer generation, and we understand that. And we're trying to set the department up for the future. But the reality is that's more full-time people. And to me, it only makes sense that if we're going to have to hire more full-time people and we're providing more staff, that we're also doing that and providing EMS. That has nothing to do with our current provider. We are since we've started doing EMS, as I said it in August, I've said it to Audra, I said it to Chris. I couldn't have predicted that first responding, along with John's crews at Northeast, has gone as smoothly as it has. Everybody's shaking their heads. We're all pleased with the way that we've integrated with John's crews. John's crews are working with us. No complaints about it. But we need to be realistic about the service that we're providing and how we do that in a cost-effective way. And in my mind, that's part of how we do it cost-effectively. And we're not doing it by ourselves. It has to be a collaborative thing with other communities.
So yeah, really, we're at a kind of important year where we're going to have to make some decisions because there are some changes that are happening. With EMS specifically, the reason that service was so affordable to our communities was because Northeast not only provided 911 to our 4 communities, they also did interfacility transport or transfers with the hospital system. That's changed for them. So we're going to have to talk about, how we move forward with that service. So now we thought it was a good time to talk about all of it. What do we see the fire department doing going forward? Are we going to start, working harder with our neighboring communities to regionalize? What's the relationship with the hospital going forward? These are all things that we need to start talking about now because we're going to have to make some big decisions pretty soon in the upcoming year about how we move all of this forward.
And so we just want to give you a little context about where we're at. So Matt's going to start off with that, and Matt has been with the fire department for 9 years now. I know none of us can believe it's been 9 years. Matt's a 2012 graduate of Camden Hills High School. Matt came to us after, actually he sent me an email in his sophomore year of college and said, hey, is there anything I can do to get involved with the fire department over the summer? And anytime anybody says that question to me, the answer is yes. So Matt got involved with us in the spring of 2014. He ended up staying on with us and finished his college junior and senior year, did it online at the University of Alaska, and got a master's in Homeland Security at Arkansas State, staying on with us. In 2017, he became a full-time employee. And in 2018-19, Matt came to Audra and I and said, hey, I found this emergence program which is a program designed for people in the first half of their career, which is at the Center of Homeland Security and Preparedness at the Postnatal Graduate College in Monterey, California, and said, hey, I found this program. Can I go to it? And it was like a 9-month program over time.
Yep, 2 weeks in California, and then the rest of it was remote.
Matt, would you turn on your microphone, please?
And so the focus of that, was working to how do we move the fire department ahead? So
Chief, before you go on, the introduction, thank you. You portrayed a department that's potentially understaffed and maybe under a little bit of stress because of that. But at the same time, you're looking to stand up is this a new department? Is that would it be under the fire, or would this be separate from fire or under fire?
So I think it's fair to say that understaffed and under stress, and what we're trying to do is avoid a situation which Knox County is in with its communication center, right? We're trying to be proactive and not have that happen. This would be, in my mind, just like the city of Rockland does. The fire department provides fire and EMS service. There are multiple, there's like 70% of fire departments provide the ambulance service.
Do you think this would strengthen the fire department?
I would say that providing the first response has strengthened the fire department. So my answer to your question is yes.
Okay.
Awesome. So this first piece is just going to be a brief overview of the EMS system and kind of how it works, and anything that I miss, hopefully John will fill in. So it split up into transporting and non-transporting services. So Northeast, Rockland, Warren, Union, they're all transporting services, which basically just means that they can take a patient from wherever they are, their home, wherever it is, to the hospital. And then there's non-transporting, which is what we are. And I think we're the only non-transporting service in the county, as far as I know. And that just means that we can go and we can provide emergency medical care, but we can't put the patient in the back of our fire truck and drive them to the hospital. We have to wait for an ambulance to come and pick them up and transport them. Part of that transporting service is there's the 911 calls, which obviously you call 911, the ambulance comes. And then there's the interfacility transfers, which is going from the hospital back to a nursing home, or Penn Bay to Main Med or something like that, transporting from medical facility to medical facility. And I know Northeast does that. North Star does that. If you've seen them around, they're run by Maine Health, and so that's Maine Health's way of doing their transfers primarily. And I think Waldoboro does that too. Belfast does that. So, and it's a way that you can get some extra revenue to do that. So right now we're non-transporting. Within that, there's 4 license levels. So 4 different levels that a provider can be at. The first one seems to be pretty uncommon, which is EMR. It's just emergency medical responder. It's very basic. It's they can help stabilize somebody who's fallen, stabilize, get C-spine. I think they can give Narcan. They can just do some really basic vitals and stuff like that. And it doesn't seem to be a very common, but it is the lowest level. The next one is EMT basic, which is more common. They can do everything the EMR can, with the addition of some airway maneuvers and a couple more drugs like epinephrine for allergic reactions. The next level is, and now those are all the basic life support levels. The advanced life support is an advanced EMT advanced, and they can do everything that the basic can do, with the addition of some more advanced airway measures, some basic cardiac rhythm monitoring, some more drugs. They can start IVs, give some fluid. And then the last level is paramedic, which is the highest level, which can do everything all the other ones can do, with even more advanced airway measures. And they can do a whole host of cardiac, either rhythm interpretation, and then they can do treatment for a lot more cardiac problems, like electrical treatment, and a whole more assortment of drugs. You can do the whole range of emergency drugs. And so those are the 4 levels. And then an EMS service is licensed at a level, and they can be permitted to a level. So For example, Rockland is licensed at the advanced level, meaning that when they respond to an EMS call, they have to have at least one responder at that advanced level. They can have the rest of them be basics or whatever, but one person needs to be there. And they're permitted to the paramedic level, which means that if they have a paramedic on staff, they can operate at that higher level. So our first responder service is non-transporting. We're licensed to the EMR level. We figured we would just go with the lowest license level because it gives the most ability for us to take people in and provide a service. So we're licensed there and we're permitted to the paramedic level. So I'm a paramedic. We have all the paramedic equipment. So when I'm on shift, I can operate at the paramedic level when I'm there. We have some people who are going to do an advanced class, so they'll be able to operate at the advanced level if they go on a call. If that makes sense. I know that was a brief synopsis, but yeah, and that's the overall
Right. And you don't
3,000
work,
foot version.
you don't work 24 hours a day, 365.
I do not.
Not yet. No, just kidding.
Yeah.
No, but that's a valid point, right? Because the way we are set up is we are expecting Matt and Jack to come back to calls off shift. So they work 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. We do expect them to come back off at nights, weekends, holidays. We have to come back at nights for trainings. And then Andrew and I do the same thing, right? So that's, right, we're asking a lot of our full-time people.
Matt, what are your, I'm sorry, did someone, so
No, go ahead. I'll go
what,
after you.
where do you hope to be? What is your hopeful staff here? I mean, obviously you're licensed at the EMR level now. Where do you want this to go?
Do you want me to answer that now? I think that's coming up
Then
later.
fine.
if that-
Okay,
if
yep.
That's okay.
Yep, let's hold off on that. Sophie?
No, it's just, so how many paramedics do we have?
One.
One. So when you're on shift, we operate at paramedic level. When you're not on shift, we're at EMR.
Well, yeah, everybody else, we don't have any EMRs. We just license there just in case somebody came on and that's what they were and that's what they wanted to be. We could still use them. Everybody else is EMT basics. EMR is pretty uncommon because it's the same amount of time and it costs the same amount of money as a basic license. So most people just get the basic license.
Okay, thank you.
But I just wanted to throw it in there because that is if you look at our license, it says EMR, but that's
So we have one paramedic and how many EMTs?
10,
yeah.
10
I think is what I told you in August.
And 2 are taking an advanced class
to become a paramedic.
to become a advanced EMT.
Advanced EMT.
There's basic, advanced, and
I have the,
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
We do have basic on staff that can operate at the basic level when Matt's not on call. Okay.
I don't know if I
So,
missed
we strive to pre-pandemic and pre-EMS first response, we typically had one person on shift. So now we are striving to have 2 on shift and always having at least a basic on shift. 6 a.m. to 6 p.m.
Okay.
Working towards coming up with a plan to have designated people to be on call 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. The challenge with that is space in the public safety building.
In that there's no overnight sleeping arrangement in the existing building. Was there at one time in the other building?
That's
No, no,
beyond
one of the-
my memory, maybe Andrew's, but I think that,
Wasn't there space before?
Yeah, when FEMA first stayed, there was.
Okay, that's when it was.
and when the police department moved down,
That all shifted.
we didn't just create space, right? They repurposed space.
So the police department took space from the fire department, is that what you're saying?
They have
I'm
guns.
just trying to. Okay.
That's what
Whoa.
I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
Not getting started.
Hopefully Randy's watching.
That's okay.
Sounded different coming out of my mouth than it did in my head.
Code office took police department space, so I mean.
Yeah,
see what I'm
right.
saying?
Okay.
You know, it was.
That's-
they said
that's a
it
good
wasn't
point.
Allocated, but they were put there to kind of put public safety kind of in one building. And obviously they moved out and code moved in here, so they didn't really take it from us, but we probably should have fought to keep a little bit of that space for growth.
One thing that if we could pass one microphone over there and just hand it to the person who's speaking, just because we're on YouTube, he's done. But if you don't mind keeping one over there, it'd be great. Thank you.
I hadn't realized there was a time when it was only the fire department in that current public safety building. Okay.
Yeah, and I think we'll chat a little bit about space, but we can do it right now if you want, or
Go for it.
I mean, Audrey and I have chatted, and I know it's just going to take a lot of work, and there might be some legal hoops and things, but the town just got some tax acquired property directly across the street from us. And I don't know if that works, but I mean, it's directly across the street, and it would be a whole lot less expensive to renovate whatever that square footage is that used to be the Beauty Mark space, MBNA, HR, and security than it would be to build a new structure. Is it ideal? No. I mean, inclement weather is the only reason why it wouldn't be ideal, but in so many ways it is ideal because it's directly across the street.
Inclement weather?
I was,
Rain, snow, just
Because you have to
coming
cross the street to go to the station to get in the truck.
so that was gonna be my, I've heard this thrown around, but, did somebody else? Okay. You're thinking that you would keep all the apparatus in the public safety building now, and the people would sleep across the road and get the tone out and then run over across the road to get in the fire truck or anything? I just wanted to make sure that was what you were thinking. You wouldn't see a scenario where that building or that space could be used, or a garage structure of some sort made in the parking lot to house at least the ambulance or something?
I mean, there's no definitive plan here, right? And that's part of what we need to say at the end is, when's our next check-in and what do you want us to provide for you at that next check-in? There's any number of scenarios, but some of the things that we do know is it's not cost effective to renovate that building. Engineers have looked at the building twice to put solar panels on it. And just to beef it up to put solar panels on it there's no solar panels on it, right? So it didn't make sense financially to do that. There's no space to go anywhere other than up on that property unless we're to take parking. And that's not my choice. That's somebody else's choice.
But your basic desire is to make it more palatable, to have more shifts for more people, and to do an overnight. There has to be some sort of overnight stay capability
Yes.
close to the fire department.
Yes.
And Chief, where would you house an ambulance? I assume an ambulance is part of this?
If that's the direction that the town wants to go in, there's 2 empty bays in the public safety building right now that we would, I mean, obviously, again, we'd need to have an engineer to take a look at the building, but
In the public safety building, there's 2 empty bays?
yeah, we sold one of our trucks several years ago to Hope, and the boat is now housed somewhere else, so. We've been purposely downshifting our apparatus because we don't have staff to operate all of them. We've been implementing these suggestions and Neil Courtney's plan from 2015 to do things more regionally and more collaboratively.
Would your ideal be to have it all in under the one roof? There, over there?
Really, we would be, but we're going a little off our outline here, but then, so if we're going to renovate the building, some of the things that we need to look at is firefighters have a higher rate of cancer than the general population. We need to get them away from the carcinogens produced by the diesel exhaust out of the apparatus, as well as the turnout gear that we're wearing. So right now we come back, typically we wash it. Everybody washes their gear, rinses it at the fire scene, washes it, but it's still carrying that carcinogens that is hanging in the apparatus bay. Ideally, we'd like to put that into a enclosed room so it's compartmentalized, has its own air exchange, So that is getting filtered out and exhausting out. And so it's not coming into the building and spreading all through the public safety building, exposing the police officers to it as well.
Kind of an interesting opportunity with all of the affordable housing talk that we've been doing. And I know the select board, or some of us were really negative about the idea of having housing at Knox Mill, but I mean, it's an interesting opportunity to try to think about how that could solve, but not solve both problems, but contribute to solving over there. There's
I
a
think we
parking
need
garage,
to think
too.
of a much better solution that puts everybody in the same housing that you're going to be responding with. I mean, it's a great thought to think, yes, we could use that for housing, but when you are in that, and I can only imagine that when that tone goes out for the biggest fire that you have to respond to, and you're all running across the street to get to, I mean,
Sure.
it just doesn't make much sense to me right off the bat to think that's like the best way to do it. I mean, it's an option,
It might not be
but
the best.
I
but
feel
it's kind of-
like-
kind of
Well, I
fair.
mean, there's also the option of moving the police.
Right.
that's what I mean. Like, I just feel like there's so many other options that should definitely be considered, because really the safety of everybody that's going to be involved, if this is the way we're going to go, should be paramount. And I'm not sure running across the street.
So just bear in
Coming
mind
from
now,
home now, right?
so just bear in mind now, everybody's coming from home,
Right.
right? Everybody's coming from home.
Yeah, so across the street is
It's an improvement.
enormous.
2000,
Minimally.
so the town voted down a number of times building a new public safety building where the parking lot is now, right? A number of times, and that was like Phil Roberts isn't here, but it was like a $4 million building, and that was 2000.
Mm.
Construction costs are what now? I'm not,
Double
certainly if
what?
somebody wants to build us a brand new building, Matt and I will help design it.
We have plenty of ideas.
We're right there. We got plenty of ideas.
What Kenny
But
Bunk's
certainly
building is-
another option is
I mean,
the police, but somebody else is going to have to suggest creating space, because I've suggested a number of times and it goes nowhere.
I mean, sure, we can say that in 2000, everybody voted down building a new building, but the whole scenario has changed. Our needs have changed. From what I'm hearing you say
Yeah.
is that our whole needs are changing. So if that's where we're at, then I think we need to think bigger. And I mean, I just feel like we can do better if that's where we're really going to go.
We're happy to think bigger.
Yes.
We're trying to think within,
Think as
an
big as-
economical time or frame, but we
It
can
might be-
certainly think big.
It might be need to do
Or
both.
not.
Sophie, go
I
ahead.
think that's what
Just-
they're trying to
Yeah,
ask us is what level do we want? I am not qualified to know what is the best thing, but it sounds like we should evaluate everything. I don't know how much of an issue it is that that's in the flood, the current building is in the floodplain.
So, I mean, we're really, to me, way into the weeds and
Sophie, go ahead,
This
and
is
then
what
we'll
we
move on to the next agenda,
Thank you.
part of the
So
agenda.
two things. I think, the housing, the having people overnight, I'm curious to hear what the bigger plan is. And because I think this discussion is very strategic in what type of fire department plus EMS we want to build, what type of partnerships we're looking into with hospitals, with other partners. I'm curious to hear that more before getting into the weeds of housing or moving, the police department or whatever. And I'm very happy that we have a broad scope in our discussion. I think it's useful. I have a question though, and it might not be the time, but typically, how do we fund those public safety expansion? Is there some federal grants? Audra, I'm sorry, I'm putting you on the spot, but
Sure.
but is it only taxpayer funded? Are there revenue streams? That was one of the questions I had
So if
in the
we're,
different
if
models.
we're doing
like,
it regionally, there are
Right.
good opportunities for funding,
Okay,
mostly for the startup costs. So that's the capital costs. That's
Right.
like purchasing equipment. And there are some grants that have come out recently that have helped with a few years worth of personnel expenses. what we all need to sort of make a decision on and figure out as a community is the long-term commitment to the personnel cost, because really in a year in, year out basis, that's going to be the huge difference for Camden. You know, we've gone a long time with only 4 full-time career firefighters, and then everybody else being, you know, a part-time on-call member of the fire department. So transitioning that model to one where you have a 24/7 shop that's fully staffed with fire and EMS personnel, it's a big change for our community. So that's really what we're kind of trying to bring up tonight and flesh out. And like you said, what are the partnerships look like? You know, with bringing on, with just having a fire service, that's all expenses. EMS, there's a little bit of revenue.
Right.
It's not, I'm not saying it's a lot of revenue. It's not, I mean, there are places that make it work. But everybody knows EMS is poorly funded and it's caused issues all across the country. So, you know, being very upfront about the fact that it's a huge investment, not only to start up the service, and yes, there are grants to help with that, but it's the ongoing investment that's really the thing that everybody needs to contemplate.
And to Sophie's point, would there be revenue streams, you know, again, whatever that state law or national law was going to change about ambulance shows up, doesn't get paid because it didn't do a transport, so they don't get paid for the time, then there was going to be maybe a change to the law, something about that. What was, I don't know. I don't know if I have it right, but.
Could we hand the microphone to John?
Sorry about that already. So the proposed change was for private insurers to start funding non-transports. Now, mind you, non-transports, particularly in our area, only accounts for about 20% of our calls. Even nationwide, on average, it's about 20% of your calls.
Transports or
Non-transports.
Non-transport, 20%.
It's pretty significant, but even of those, there's only a small percentage that actually have patients. You look at calls where we stand by for fire alarms, or we stand by for carbon monoxide alarms. There's no patients for those calls, and there's nobody to bill. Waiting for a hiker that's lost in the woods, you're still not going to get reimbursement for those, and those are a significant amount of what we stand by for our non-transports. So 12% have patients. So it is probably it's highballing it, honestly. But that's what you'd be looking at. And the only thing they're looking at is 200% of what Medicare would normally reimburse for an ambulance response. So you're looking at pennies for when you compare it to the standby time, which is really what the expense is for EMS, is the standby time. You're paying for folks to stand by awaiting those 911 calls, which is generally, like in our case, that's what the subsidy truly covers, is the standby time.
What are our numbers compared for the last few years to, I mean, I know that it's staffing and all of that, but our response call to just fires, take the EMS, the first responder out of it, has our fire calls increased? Have they, you know, I mean, if we're doing 295 calls a year, if we're doing 1,200 calls a year, you're doing 831, you know, what is our fire call a year?
Is there another part of this presentation that I was just looking at? Is there a section that was already going to go over some of the?
I don't think that's going to go over that question. I don't know if the chief has the numbers.
Let's answer this one and then let's get back, because I know Chief Farley has an agenda that he wants us to, I'm sure the questions will come out.
Yeah.
As we go.
To do it. Actually, it dipped in 2020 because of
Right.
COVID.
I wonder why.
Actually surprised by
Yeah.
that. Everybody home cooking.
There was, like, downtown was a ghost town in 2020.
You saying something interesting over there?
No.
No?
2013, we did 372 calls, 2014, 527, 2020, 300, 2022, 383, And January 1 through October 4th, 543 for this year.
Is that including your EMS calls?
Yep.
Yeah. So it's about a call a day.
Yep.
If,
Yep.
on average, if we're gonna,
Actually, it's more
More
that.
than a call day.
well, no, I'm saying if we take the EMS side out of it, if it's just, we're just talking about fire
Yes.
and
What's the percentage of EMS? I'm confused. Out of 543, do you know?
195
I do
was
know.
the last number that you gave us.
We're at typically a fire department that does EMS. Typically 70% of their calls are EMS. We are at, let's just call it 40%.
Okay.
39.96.
Okay.
We want to call that 40.
Thank you.
What's next on the agenda? Chief, are you ready to go on to item number 2 on the agenda, which is
Yeah, so
overview?
Sean's just going to give a brief overview of how the EMS works. Sean has been with us for a couple of years. He's been in Camden for a couple of years. Came on board. He's one of our part-time on-call folks, and his full-time job is he works for the state of Washington, actually, the health department. He's an epidemiologist.
Wow.
Right up there. Man.
Thank you. For those I've met before and those where it's new, it's both a pleasure. Thank you. And really quickly, so as Chief mentioned, I came here 2 years ago and moved here from Washington State. And shortly after, I actually spoke with Earl during a vote and asked about volunteering. And here I am in a course to be a advanced EMT. So where we are now is Camden currently serves as 24/7 EMS responder and care provider. And as was mentioned before, along with Hope, Lincolnville, and Rockport, we currently contract with Northeast Medical Services, Melville Medical Services, for access to EMS transport service. In our current service model, we're dispatched by Knox Regional Communications Center, along with our EMS partners currently contracted to provide transport. When we're able to arrive first on scene, we initiate EMS patient assessment and care. And has been found in part in the report that Chief had referenced. What's been found widely is that fire departments, Camden included, are optimally positioned to provide EMS service as we're already embedded in the communities that we serve. So leading from that, in all situations, it's really important to remember faster response equals improved patient outcomes across the board. This is especially true in trauma and other life-threatening situations. Time to initiating care is a determining factor in patient outcomes. Hallmark examples of this would be cardiac arrest, stroke, allergic reactions in children. Also, too, in all situations, a most timely response really contributes to greater patient, parent, and caregiver comfort, as well as their perceived satisfaction in the services that are being provided. We currently respond using fire apparatus, primarily engine 6. And on engine 6, we carry all supplies and equipment that are necessary to provide comprehensive EMS patient care and assessment in the field, short of transport. On scene, we provide initial scene and patient assessment and initiate the highest priority treatment, aiming to best preserve life, of course, and stabilize the patient condition. When our EMS transport partners arrive, we provide a report of patient assessment and care given up to that point. We also work in concert with those partners to complete care necessary on scene. We also ensure the safe transition of patients to the ambulance. And then officially, we transfer patient care to the EMS transporting service. Certainly at times, our partners at Northeast Medical Services, they also serve as first responders on scene. For example, when Camden Fire staffing does not allow us otherwise to be the most immediate responder. So that said, real opportunities exist for us to further improve service to the communities we serve, and better ensure the safety and health of our constituents. And as public servants, all of us realize that ensuring the safety and health of the communities we serve is, at the end of the day and always, our first responsibility. So what are those opportunities that we see? First, our capacity to provide the most timely EMS response throughout all hours of need is currently constrained by our current staffing model. For example, during staff off hours from evening through early morning. A more contemporary staffing model, more responsive to community needs, will allow improved response time to the scene and enhance patient outcomes. Second, while Engine 6 does support timely response and comprehensive patient care on scene, it does not provide for transport of patients to the hospital or emergency care they ultimately need. And this is a key link in the continuity of care. And with an in-house ambulance, we would expand our capacity to provide more comprehensive and cohesive EMS care to Camden residents, further optimizing patient outcomes. Cost savings from eliminating our current need to contract for transport services could help us offset the investment of adding an in-house EMS ambulance transport capacity. So how we might evolve towards that. So with ambulance capacity, we could initially provide transport services to partner jurisdictions as one step towards ultimately providing integrated EMS care and transport.
This is so interesting and informative. I'm really enjoying listening to this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Going with our own ambulance service, how would that affect the other towns that also, right now, we're the biggest payer, I believe, of the Northeast contract because of the number of people that are supported by that. Does that leave our neighboring towns a little bit in the lurch? Or are we, in your vision, are you supporting those towns collaboratively as well?
Well, I think Chief would have probably a better say around the whole context of that.
Mm-hmm.
I think this presentation and those points were made were really addressing really patient outcomes and our ability to optimize those and best serve our community. As far as those partnerships, as Audrey had mentioned, that would need to be built and maybe tailored in a way, I'm too new on the scene to really know that underlying context.
So I think that we're, Neil Courtney's 2015 report and the Venus report says we should all be doing more of this together, right? And I think us partnering with Hope to provide admin services for the first responders is just this, that's just an example of us making sure that we're continuing with those partnerships.
For the people that didn't have the benefit, the people in the town that don't have the benefit of seeing that report right at the moment, what were the other towns that were in the recommendation as far as for you to collaborate with most likely?
Lincolnville, Hope, and Rockport.
What about Rockland?
Rockland wasn't part of that study. That was those four towns in the hospital did study.
Do you think that would be a change in the new report that's being updated? Is that a consideration or is it not out there yet?
I don't know. Neil's really just started to do that report. So
I'm just curious.
not speaking for him. I know he's listening tonight. Sure, I'll get some feedback tomorrow.
Okay.
I mean, have you had discussions with any of those towns? Lincolnville, Hope, Rockport?
Many. Yeah, many. So I think that, it is pretty safe to say that, not that it's safe to say, it would be, I think, difficult for those three towns to move forward with their current EMS model if Camden has our own service. You know, I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth because that's somebody else's model. So, you know, it would be a conversation. Do we design this so that we're, you know, provide like by contract providing service to those communities as well? That's an option and something that, you know, if this is something that you're interested in us progressing, that we'd have to talk to our partner communities about.
Go ahead.
At one point, there was talk about contracting with Rockland, maybe, to have them basically expand their model to serve us. Is that something that's on the table, not on the table? How does,
So we were talking with all those communities, including Rockland, and Rockland transitioned their department. So they added a whole new shift of people. They went from having 3 shifts to 4 shifts. And Chief Wytalk wanted to concentrate for a while on getting that 4th shift hired and up and running and getting people educated. So they weren't in a place where they wanted to continue that at that point. I don't want to speak for him. I did ask him to come tonight. But I think the events of yesterday kept him home tonight. So.
And I would say that there have been a lot of conversations, particularly amongst Camden, Rockport, and Rockland, about having some sort of regional fire-based EMS model. I'd say the most difficult part of it, besides the money, of course, is the level of service issue that we're having now. So you have Rockland that's got, you know, fire-based EMS. Everybody expects you call for an ambulance, or you call because you have a fire in Rockland. Someone's going to show up within 7 minutes. That's the average response time, is 7 minutes. And the community's used to paying for that. That's the level of service they expect. And that's how it's been for a very long time. That is not the same level of service that you get in Rockport or Camden. And it's not what we've paid for. So making that adjustment, and Rockport, credit where credit's due. They've managed to keep like a true volunteer fire department going for years and years and years. Very dedicated group of people. They're also aging out of being able to do that, and they're confronting the same issue that we're having now. They're just a little bit, we're a little bit ahead of them in terms of having to, solve that issue. And
they just hired this year 2 full-time firefighters.
So that was a huge change for them, going from all call division people, except for the chief, to having 2 career people and call division people. So reconciling those levels of service amongst our 3 communities is really difficult. So it's not just about, can we stand up a regional service and put it together? It's how do you make sure that Rockland isn't losing out or their costs aren't increasing because they've regionalized with 2 communities that aren't used to paying the same cost in terms of what they get for fire and EMS services. So it's really difficult to do that where we're at now versus where Rockland's at, even though there's a desire to do that.
And we kind of have a little bit of an example of those differences now with, if I recall, one of the reports, maybe it was the Northeast report, maybe it was yours, that mentioned response time to Hope. It's further out there. It takes longer. It's a 20-minute response, I think is what's in the report, versus Camden is, 13 minutes or something like that in the report. And so there is, difference based on geography where that happens. And I appreciate you talking about the processes. Now, if I recall, there was also something from the EMS committee about their processes that Northeast has for when Northeast goes to a call. Is that something that the processes that you have at Northeast, is that something that's shared with the other departments and communities that you service? You're on call, the way you handle calls?
The way you mean as far as how we staff and that, we share that openly. I mean, we staff 3 ambulances during the day. one in the late hours of the night, but two for the good portion of the evening. We are primarily at the paramedic level. I'd say almost all of my ambulances are at the paramedic level, or we provide a paramedic. More recently with staffing, particularly on weekends, it tends to be a paramedic on a fly car. But we do provide the paramedic as required for those calls.
I just want to understand what you're saying. Are you saying that like Camden uses the I am responding?
Mhm.
So everybody knows who's on their way, going to be there. Is that the same? Can Camden go on to a program and see what your staffing level is for the day and like what trucks you have available, or is?
In a fashion. So because ours is so fluid, I don't keep my staff in there. It changes nearly hourly, and it really doesn't give you an idea of who's responding on that truck. I tend to move folks around based on the need of the calls. So it can be very cumbersome for the number of staff that we have in trucks. I try to keep my
Every day you would know who's on call or
I keep my
who
trucks
you
up to date.
have.
I keep my trucks up to date
Okay.
as to how many trucks I have. That was an agreement between myself and Rockland, so that they knew who their mutual aid was available.
Is that kind of what you were asking?
That's part of it, and I didn't know, I couldn't remember well the conversation that we had during the committee meeting about the procedures and the call-out procedures that Northeast has, and they were going to share that, I thought, with the other fire departments, and I didn't know if that happened.
You mean as far as our response plan?
Yes.
It's been being finalized by our medical director, but it's still been made public through that meeting. As far as the finalization of that document, it has to be signed off by the medical director underneath main EMS rules. So Dr. Busco and I have gone back. There hasn't been much change. It was really just the only thing we went back and forth on was actually our emergency response to a lost hiker. Those types of calls where we wouldn't respond to emergency unless we had a confirmed injury at the trail head. If they were still an hour into the woods, then there was no need for an ambulance to respond code 3 or emergency status with lights and sirens for somebody who's still well into the woods. So that was the only thing we really kind of went back and forth with, but it would be public. And it was made public for the most part at that meeting.
Can I go back to a few things that
Please.
You came up with? So sometimes you said that you show up first, which I think is great. But that just means that sometimes you show up to a scene where Northeast is already there. And how has that worked? Has that been a useful tool to have other people on hand? Do you both interchangeably use the items that are at the scene? Do you use the same tools, stuff?
Are you directing that specifically to me?
Like stretchers and stuff, or like,
So
Just any
But wait,
items that
but
are
wait.
like on Camden's truck? Is it useful to have another team show up that is ready to jump in and help? Or,
there are certainly the calls that the extra hands are always helpful.
yes,
There are, anecdotally from my crews, sometimes more people for say a UTI isn't always helpful, but sometimes those calls do go sideways or they do need extra lifting assistance and stuff like that. Every case is different.
right.
Our equipment is compatible. Our cardiac monitor,
Yeah,
we have the
that's what I
same
was
cardiac
trying to think.
monitor. We have all the same tools that are required under protocol.
Okay.
They may just be like our glucometer may not be compatible, but it does the same thing. If they get a glucometer, they get a blood glucose, I'm not going to check it again. I'm going to trust their equipment.
And you feel that right now that relationship is communicated well? Like, do you guys have like a monthly, jam session where you're like, okay, you guys showed up to this call, or when we showed up, we kind of felt like we took over. which maybe that's the way it should feel because you are our contracted people, but are those conversations happening to say, well, that didn't run as smoothly as possible, how can we do it better? Do you feel like that's happening? Do you want it to happen?
Try to avoid the situation all around. I'd
Well,
like
we
them to
live in
just go
reality.
smoothly. And so far, I mean, Chief Farley and I are on scenes together pretty regularly. I haven't heard of any concerns from either my staff or from the fire department. So I think so far everything has gone fairly well. There's been learning curves, particularly for some of my staff who have not been in that situation where they've had first responders. So sometimes taking report from somebody when you have your rhythm was a little bit of a learning curve for some folks. But I think they've handled it very well. I haven't heard, and I've asked folks how have things been going, on scene, even if it's just not an official complaint or anything like that, but I still haven't heard unofficial things. So in public safety, I feel like that's kind of a win.
I can say in the one call where Northeast was there on scene and we arrived after, my experiences was that we worked really seamlessly, to tell you the truth. We shared assessments. We chipped in with assessments, as was mentioned. Some calls, really, the extra hands, whether it be for lifting or transporting a patient, are really essential rather than calling for,
Right.
additional. And certainly for things like a code, those hands really come in to be quite critical. So,
Yeah.
When we started, actually before we started in January, Matt Otter and I went over and chatted with John and Rick Petrie, and Rick was like, well, why are you wanting to do this? And I told him, we're just here to enhance the services we're providing the community. The direction and the guidance that we gave to our crew is if Northeast gets there first and starts patient care, what we do is we go up and say, hey, we're here. Is there anything we can do to help you? And that's the way it's been. If we get there first, we start patient care and assessment. When Northeast arrives, we say, this is what we found. This is what we're doing. Your patient, what do we do to help you now? That's been the guideline that we've given to our folks, and I couldn't have asked for it to go more smoothly. Should we meet monthly? Actually, Matt and I just talked about that last week. Is that it probably is a wise idea for us to get together and just chat things over with John. There is a Knox County EMS Chiefs meeting tomorrow that we'll be participating in, but it's probably beneficial for us to get together with John just periodically and say, hey, how's things going? Anything we could be doing better on? Anything we could change up? And I think we're certainly cognizant of the fact that there are times when there are too many people, and there's definitely people that are folks that hang back. One or two of us will go in and make contact and say, hey, we're here. What can we do to help? And everyone else will stay back because we don't want to flood somebody's house, right? They're already anxious that somebody's coming in their house, wherever it happens to be. We don't want to flood somebody's house with 8 people if 3 can do it, right? But today, it needed to be like what? 6 of us?
Yeah.
5 of us?
5 of us. Yeah. Yeah. And just to really tally on, sometimes that extra help is just the documentation. So we have like a sheet that you write the name and the vitals and all that stuff. And sometimes that doesn't get done if it's just a normal 2-person staff. So having some extra people there to, hey, any allergies, medications, anything like that. And then like one call we had, there was a fairly significant car accident, and we were there first, and we started doing some stuff. And then one of the Northeast medics came, and they really took control. And okay, this is what we need to do to get them out. The chief and I saw him at a later call a week later or something like that. And he said, hey, I hope I didn't, step on your toes or anything. I'm like, no, it was awesome. You came in, you've got way more experience with this than we do. And no, it was great. And so we're working on doing a training together for vehicle extrication and car accidents. And so, just as an example of it working together and kind of going through some of those calls that are a little iffy, and all right, how do we make this better for the next time? So it is happening, but not regimented every month or so. But
Sophie?
So if I understand correctly, if we had an ambulance in Camden, in the fire department, we could still potentially contract with Northeast, and we would increase the capacity so that we would respond in a more timely fashion and increase patient outcomes. So basically what we're trying, and we could also potentially provide more services to the 4 towns and increase our regionalization, correct? Is that the footprint that we're kind of thinking about? Is it,
That's a good point.
is it, so, because I've read this report, I've learned a lot. It was super interesting. And I'm trying to figure out, there's different models and different options, and I'm sure all of you have a preference. And I understand the tension between patient outcome and expectations. I think everybody around the table says, people are expecting a level of service that right now we may or may not be able to provide. For instance, I was struck by the first paragraph of the report saying people expect an EMS to show at their house and be able to address a cardiac arrest, which was not the expectation 30 years ago. So we are in a different model. So I'm trying to, I would love, with your permission, Tom, to move the conversation to what types of models, what can we build that provides better patient outcomes, that maybe extend us to a larger footprint in the spirit of cooperation and regionalization, and try to think about what model we want to create and what partnerships. So I see Northeast has a role to play. I think we work well together. If I understand correctly, there's good cooperation there. There's no overlap. There's good, communication could be improved. That's also something that struck me in the report, that regular communication and could improve the processes. The role of the hospital, I'm not very clear yet, and I would love maybe Chief, you can help me understand what Penn-Bay's role is in the provision of those services, because I'm not sure I understand. But if we could move maybe the discussion towards, thinking a bit more where we want to put our energy and our dollars. Maybe also, I understand the tension between patient outcome and investment, but we need to build a service for the future that's going to,
Sure. And how specific would you like to get, Sophie?
I think so. If I understand correctly, for this workshop, Audra and the chief, and you're waiting for kind of direction and telling, where we think you should put your effort in modeling something, right? I think that's one of the outcomes of this meeting, if I understand correctly.
Yeah, I think
In broad strokes,
our version
we're
of
not gonna
success
do it-
was everyone having a really good understanding of,
Right.
where we are, and how it relates to the region, and
Right.
ideas on how you want to move this forward. So I
Right.
guess a lot of this is precipitated by the fact that the relationship with the hospital has drastically changed very recently. So it used to be that the hospital completely relied on, and was it a contract, John, or was it really just a agreement? I'm not sure if it was a contract or what the deal was, but they primarily relied on Northeast to do the interfacility patient transfers. So if you have a patient that's at Penn Bay and they need to go to Main Med, they would call Northeast, and Northeast would be the one that would do that. That changed, and now they have their own internal service that provides that interfacility transfers of patients, and that's the North Star
So that cut
service.
into your business model.
They did. Yeah, definitely cut into the revenue stream.
Okay.
Right. And so for that reason, and the fact that Northeast had that relationship with the hospital, and they were able to split their time between doing those interfacility transfers and the 911 calls, it kept our service very economical. I don't want to talk about what this is going to mean for Northeast, but I think that we need to be prepared for the year ahead, them coming to us and saying, in order to honor the contract that we have with you, because we don't have that supplementary income from the interfacility transfers, we're going to have to make up the difference by charging communities more for 911. That's just realistically to keep our level of service. I don't see any other place they're going to be getting revenue from. John can correct me if I'm wrong, though. So that's one of the reasons why we're sort of coming to you and saying, we've got this non-transporting first responder program, we can start making that into a transporting program. And, there's a number of different ways that could go. It could be staged, so that we still have that partnership with Northeast and figuring out how that works. But really it's how, we're going to have to pay more for EMS. We're going to have to pay more for fire. It's not very cost effective for us to just have firefighters, and it's very difficult to just get firefighters and not get a lot of people that are cross-trained. So, realistically, and this is just based on, getting, recruiting people and being economical with the people that we have, it would make more sense knowing that we're entering into a world where we're going to have more full-time people to have them cross-trained as both EMS and firefighters. So I guess we're telling you that that's sort of the reality of the world that we're entering into. And we have a number of different options for models. One could be going forward with Northeast again. It could be doing our own fire-based EMS program. And it could be transitioning that to a more regional system where we're working with communities like Rockland and Rockport to, design and structure that system. So we're really, and also another model, maybe the hospital wants to take on 911. So these are all things that we can look at and we need to be talking about, but we really need to be doing it now. And we really need to be making some decisions about which way we go quickly.
So that's super helpful. Thank you.
Allison?
Has there been any discussion or thought? I know we've received a couple emails about this and it's come up in budget committee before about any possible overlap with police department responsibilities or coordination. I know that's a touchy subject, but I've personally been at many calls where it started out with a police officer and then it turned into an ambulance call and then it turned into the fire department coming because what that person really needed was to be able to be lifted into a vehicle to get to the hospital. There is some overlap. I know we're having trouble with the police department too. Is there any cross-training happening there?
So
Or
I know there was talk at the budget committee about public safety
officers?
right?
Mhm.
So Randy and I met with Mary Beth and talked about that, and I followed up on some of the information that she provided us from someplace in the Silicon Valley.
Michigan is what she's citing most recently.
Yeah, there was a place in California that she actually contacted, and somebody got back to her, someplace in the Silicon Valley.
I could be incorrect. Thank you.
And there was a place in Michigan too where she grew up that talked about it, but I followed up with the
Okay.
folks in California.
Mhm.
And so it was 2 years from time of hire to educate until somebody actually went on the street and provided a service to the community. 2 years.
Yeah, and that's a lot for
Investment.
one person to
It's a
take
huge
in, I
investment.
think.
Then you're still
In terms of
relying
being,
on
for one
surrounding
person to be able to
towns.
do everything.
With that being said, we did have a lot of police officers that took the EMS training.
Right.
For basic
But-
EMT.
Is that for Narcan?
No, it was back in 2019. We were talking about starting first response. And we did have a lot, but none of them are doing it here now. And not many of them finished. And if they did, they do it in other places. So
Yeah, and I guess that, the difficulty, this is a problem that we're having. It's all public safety people across the country. The first, real glaring example that we've all seen is Knox County, Regional Communications Center. But the police department, a lot of people ask, why aren't they out on radar detail? Why aren't they doing this? Why aren't they doing that? Well, the answer is they're all working tons of overtime just to keep us open as a 24/7 hour police department. So when that's sort of the reality that we don't have enough people to provide the level of service to communities because it's really hard to retain public safety professionals, I think that we're a little ways off from a system where we can expect police officers to be EMTs. I think it's a wonderful goal to have. And, you know, maybe at some point we'll get there, but I think that we're just trying to provide the basic services everybody expects.
I'm not necessarily saying police officers would be EMTs. I'm saying if we invest in people that are trained in fire and EMS, can they also be responding to, you know, if they're going to be there, or maybe they're just busy all the time already and they just wouldn't have time to do anything else, but are there ways that they could alleviate some of the police department responsibilities, like, you know, parking on sidewalks and things like that? I know we have our fire, how does it working with code enforcement also? Is that any part of this
But
discussion? Or
they're, as they are now, the people that they have, like Matt has to work 6 to 6 and then come in when it's days off and at night as it is.
Right, we'd be
Let
talking about
alone-
getting more people though to be able to do the,
Yeah. They don't grow them on trees. They're hard to come by.
Let's go back to the structure here, and my
That's a big
computer's
no.
down, but if we could move on to the next agenda. I think some more is good to come out of what we have planned.
Well, the next thing we're going to talk about was Alex was just going to go over some of the incidents that we've been on, but I'll leave that up to you. Do you want to hear some of those? Or
Well, let's do a
do you
time
want
check.
us
I
to
mean,
go-
I think,
I don't,
It's a-
your agenda said 8 o'clock, so.
right. So
I don't know
what
how
do we
long-
want to do?
I would like to
I'd
hear
like to
more
hear-
about.
Let's go quickly through it, and then we'll hit you with some final questions.
Yeah, I'll be real quick. Really, I don't have a whole lot to say. What I just wanted to briefly talk about was just my experience over the last 6 months doing EMS with the fire department. Sort of like the softer side of, you know, the non-numbers and the technical stuff. It's just sort of my personal philosophy, you know, is that having this system, having our EMS system now with fire department makes our community stronger and better. You know, it's something that is good for our community. Obviously, helping people quickly and providing medical services is, you know, I mean, that's what we need to do as a community, as select board people, is like, you know, fundamental. So that's sort of, you know, that's not earth shattering, but, you know, there's a softer side of that too, when, you know, you're dealing with people in your community that, you know, of course, or you work with, or they work in our community, or they're part of our, you know, greater, you know, 5-town community, because, you know, sure, we have our residents that we take care of. You know, we've got people that come into town to work here, and, you know, they're part of our family on some level because, you know, they're working here. We have our, you know, you go to Hannaford, we had a call in Hannaford, and, you know, of course, you know, they're our community too, people that come and shop and spend time. So generally speaking, I just, you know, you hear about the car accidents, you hear about cardiac arrests, you hear about some of the trauma, but, you know, we have a lot of calls with just citizen assist calls, very basic. Someone fell out of the bed, they need help getting back up. They get out of their wheelchair, you know, they're calling Northeast, they're calling us. That's what we do. You know, we're helping each other, and, or that provider who can't help their mother up into the bed at night. So, you know, there's a whole range of things that we do. It's not this crazy EMS running to the, you know, big car accident trauma. It's, you know, it's the mountain rescue. You know, we have people, you know, it's the tourists that come and have whatever issue, you know, that happens. Had a bunch of those this summer. So, you know, having this robust emergency services dimension of Camden Fire is just making our community better, just like a good school does, just like good infrastructure and roads, just like, you know, some good town government that does the right thing. So, you know, I just sort of just wanted to paint that picture a little bit for you guys, just, you know, from a softer side of just, you know, kind of it's, you know, it builds good community, having good emergency services, you know, and I think it's what people value when, you know, when you pick someone off the floor in the middle of the night, you know, that's what you do in a small town. We take care of each other, and, you know, whether it's as simple as that or as scary as a cardiac arrest or overdose or car accident. So, yeah, and just we have such a diverse community because we are Camden, with residents and visitors and our 5-town kind of community that shops and works in our area. So.
I have another question, if I may. So Life Flight also is part of this approach to emergency response, correct? So are they
Thanks,
here?
Alex.
Are they, thanks, Alec.
Well, I think that, kind of goes into the part that Audra said where the hospital comes into play, right? Because Penn Bay provides a limited range of services.
Right.
And patients need to get to other hospitals to get the care that they need,
Right.
cardiac insulin, for example. So Lifeline is just one of the ways people get from Penn Bay to another hospital. Could be a transporting ambulance. Lifeline just recently put in their own ground transport ambulance.
Yeah, they bought the ambulance, right? So they're also beefing up their services because we have an aging population. We have all those things we know about. Okay.
So the last thing on the agenda is kind of the wrap up. And I'm hoping that we get to, and Matt, maybe you'll get there, Chief, maybe they'll get there, talking about structure, talking about what we might want to move, see going forward. So where Camden Fire can be, is that you, Matt?
Yeah, I think so.
Thank you.
So just kind of taking it all in from everything we've talked about and looking at what we have, right? So we have the fire department and we do the fire, we now do the CMS. The fire calls have been pretty consistent throughout the years. But the number of people has definitely gone down. I mean, I know since I've been here 5 years ago, you kind of fight to get on a truck, and now it's not like that anymore at all. And like the chief said, you might have 2 or 3 people responding to a night call. And the night calls are difficult. Right? People work full-time jobs. They come in, chief says, I'm on call on my off times, but I have a pregnant wife and a 2-year-old at home. And if she needs me or the baby needs me, that's where I'm at. So that's a major problem. And it's a problem that I don't think it's not going to go away. And I think there's a timeline on it. I think 2 or 3 years, maybe 5, you're going to have some real problems getting people to come, and just the staffing in the fire department. Like the chief said, a lot of the people are starting to get older. They're going to get to the point where they don't really want to do it anymore. And as they, that makes sense. And there's just not the people coming in to backfill that. And so that's where we are at the fire department. We do the EMS. We don't transport, but we do have that capability. Engine 6 has the capability, like an ambulance, in the sense that it has everything on it that an ambulance would have. Maybe not with the quantity, but it has everything that's on it. But we can't transport anybody. And the other thing I thought about was, since I've been here in the 9 years, is that I've had people consistently throughout the time come in and say, oh, I came in, we're driving by, something happened medically to someone in the car, and I stopped here because you guys have an ambulance, right? And you can help us. No, we can call the ambulance for you though, and we'll stay here until you need help. Or I'll leave work, and someone will be like, oh, you're off work. Well, what do you work, 24 hours? So no, I ended at 6. Oh, well, who's down at the station? Nobody is. Oh, what do you mean? Well, if there's a call, someone hopefully answers the pager. And I think if you asked a large majority or a large portion of the public, they would say that, oh yeah, we have people down there 24/7 and there's an ambulance. I would bet very highly that that's what people would think. So that's what the perception is already. And we get that on calls. We'll go in and we're like, all right, well, we're taking their vitals, and we're like, yeah, we're just waiting for the ambulance to get here. And they're like, well, I thought you were the ambulance. No, we're the fire department. We don't have one. So in terms of where we want to go with it, I think we need to go to the 24-hour shift. I don't really see that as much of an option. I think if we want to ensure that people respond at night, we're going to have to. And I think the time frame on that is, like I said, a couple years, because eventually you're just not going to have it anymore. And I think, like the chief said, if you're going to have those people, if you're going to have that staff there, I think it makes financial sense. Although you might be paying a little bit more, I think the bang for your buck for the taxpayer is to be able to provide that transporting ambulance capability the fire calls might be remaining consistent pretty much throughout the years, but the ambulance calls are not going to, and they're just going to keep going up because, like you said, people are getting older and the medical system's not getting any better, and all sorts of things, right? So that's only going to go up. And so if we know we're going to have to change something just to respond to the fire calls, to add in that piece that's saying, okay, now we can provide this transporting service too. We can help ensure that if one of our residents does have a medical problem, they can get that most important piece of care, which is treating them with diesel and getting them to the hospital and to a doctor. And so I think if you ask most of us, well, where we see it going, we see it going in that sort of direction where more staff, 24/7 coverage, and having an ambulance in there, just as a matter of being the most economical and just the best for the community.
Would you still see a need, and maybe the need is because of transition time, would we still need Northeast?
Yeah.
Short term and transition. And we probably don't, maybe even long term, you think,
Yeah.
just to have the additional people
Yes.
between the lots.
And to get to, we might, we could next budget say, all right, we're going to hire 8 more people. Finding the 8 people is going to be hard. And so that's going to take time. And even just getting those 8 people, you have to make it on par with the other communities, right? Most people don't want to work a 12-hour fire shift. It's much better to work a 24-hour shift. My wife keeps saying, oh man, I wish you worked a 24-hour shift. And I'm like, yeah, well, it is what it is.
She might want to think that over. You're going to be gone 4 mornings a week.
Sure. It's true. But I'm gone a lot just responding to these. It would be nice to be able to go home and not have to worry. I just get home. Yeah. Yeah. You'd be surprised. Yeah.
You're working the shift that I saw my father work.
And I get home and then we're doing, it's almost bedtime. It's like, oh, I should probably go to this. And then, so,
Right.
and there's pros and cons there's pros and cons with all of it. And,
I was just being.
And as part of that, when Chief White and I have talked about this, that doesn't mean we're giving up on the on-call firefighters.
oh yeah, definitely not.
We still would encourage that and still support that and still want that to be a part of the system, right? Because we still want to have that
But you could at
that
least
element
have
that Alex talked about.
a guaranteed minimum.
And
Which you don't necessarily have.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot, the guaranteed minimum is a lot smaller right now.
Right.
yeah. And I don't know if that answers your question. But I think part of this conversation, at least for us, is okay, this is where we see it going. Those are the big things that we see coming. And then, asking you guys, well, what would you want, or what do you think? What do you want in a service? What do you want to know is down at the public safety building all the time? And maybe that is not 24-hour shift and it doesn't matter. I mean, but that's where we're coming from. And then hopefully, part of this is working together and figuring out where we want to go from there and how we want to make it work, how we want to get from point A to point B. Because that's part of it, is having that plan, having a 3 or 5 year plan, so that when we do want to hire people, it's, this is where we're going. And it might deviate a little bit, but like, here it is. We need that to hire people, and we need that to keep people here too. It's good to know, okay, this is where we're going. So it's not like, well, maybe 5 years we're sitting back here having the same conversation, because it's not going to happen.
We can't be sitting here having
Yeah.
the same conversation in 5 years. And frankly, that's
A lot of people here won't be
frankly, that's
sitting.
part of my frustration, is the number of times that we've had this conversation over the last 15 years.
Allison?
Although I would say that looking at the last time that we had this conversation on the select board and budget committees, and having people I know come to me and say they felt uncomfortable because they arrived at a scene and they didn't know if firefighters that said, I do kind of know how to do CPR, but I wasn't sure if I could or not or should. I mean, there's been a huge amount of progress made
Sure.
in the last few years. It's really impressive. I mean, just to see people like Jody and Linda Clancy are being trained to respond to calls and integrating with the fire department. You guys have accomplished a lot more than I even realized. So that's pretty, I mean, I don't know, what's the next, how much more money do you really need? What are the
So,
levels?
well,
of-
wait, before you
Okay.
get, before you talk money.
Okay.
Thank you for saying that. Because Chris Nolan, when we talked the other day, was asking about the trucks, right? What's this truck have? What's this truck have on it? And I gave him his answers. Those trucks can have all the bells and whistles and everything they want on them, but they're no good without these folks sitting right directly across from me, right? And these folks have put in the time and the effort to get the education, to get licensed, to provide the service. And they started pre-COVID, worked through COVID. I can't tell you the iterations of their program and how it was delivered to them. And they've done it, and they're doing an awesome job. We got an email from the person doing our QA last week, and there was some good positive feedback in there. And he said, you're all are to be commended for what you've done and accomplished, and I'm proud of you. And I think we all have to be proud of the work and the effort that these folks have put in. We can have all the
Absolutely.
fancy
Hey.
trucks we want, but these folks are the ones providing the service.
Great.
Yeah,
Go
I've
ahead.
personally been impacted a lot by it. I did not realize how much. I started out thinking that we could, reduce the number of first responders, maybe reduce the number of police officers. Having had family members call 911 a bunch of times and seen just the amount of effort beyond even just the administering care, but the talking, the hours and hours of talking and trying to help people figure out what they should do. I've had ambulance drivers sit with me while I waited for a body to be picked up, and just there's a lot of that I know happens too. So it's very much appreciated. And to go with what Alex said, having somebody that even just a little bit makes just such a difference. And I don't know how you measure that exactly, but the knowledge of knowing, oh, that's Allison's dad, or that's just knowing a little bit about where you're going and what you might encounter and how you might be able to help it. It's certainly made a big difference for my family and friends, and so it's very appreciated and noticed. And I have people say it all the time to me about, wow, the fire department came with the ambulance, and it was like this great thing. So thank you.
Good to hear.
So maybe instead of talking about money, you could talk about people, the number of people.
That's exactly what I want. I think that to move this forward to the board, there's a few things we need. And we'll need you, Chief, in your group to gather these things for us. We'll need to know, like how you want to, in your ideal world, or maybe a variety, a structure or a variety of structures that you might suggest.
You're talking staffing structures?
Correct. Well, structures in all aspects, because you're talking about
Partnerships.
yeah, partnerships. You're talking about buildings. You're talking about staff, but I think primarily staff and equipment. And then some of the details we can work out from there. Obviously, we're going to need to know for those structures. We're going to need to have a broad idea of budgets. And Sophie, what do you think?
And maybe, so, I mean, there's big investment costs, at the onset, and maybe thinking about a stepped approach. So something we can build, over the years, but I like what you said about having a 3-5 year plan.
Sure.
So that we can, I think might be also, easier to finance.
Oh, definitely.
I agree. The desired end state, but with Sophie's idea too, I think is great. And then, data as much as possible, where you can say, you invest this and we build it this way, and, we're going to be able to increase whatever the data is that you can collect. Response time. Probably there's others that I'm missing. But I know, I think Northeast works out of Rockport Public Works area. Certainly having something over here would increase response time in Camden. Maybe that's a selling point. I don't know, but whatever you think that is that would benefit us in the community to know. That would be part of a presentation. Board, anything else that we'd like to hear from Chief or his staff?
So if I may, what is our mental health response? I mean, because my understanding is that there are lots of calls that are not, that we can't answer because the police shows up, but it's more of a mental health issue. It's not necessarily a medical issue in the sense that you don't put a splinter on it. And I'm wondering, do we have appropriate mental health, trained personnel who can answer those types of crises that it seems, my understanding, and I may be completely wrong about it, and I'm happy to be corrected, that we don't have. It's a big gap to fill, and maybe something to think of in designing this new plan to address this community need.
Yeah, maybe John wants to answer that a little bit, but we were sent to a mental health call, I think last week. And I told our guys, or I told our crew, we're not going to that call because that's what the call was dispatched as. And as was mentioned, the number of people, right? We didn't need to provide Northeast 2 people plus 2 or 3 more from Canada Fire to some of them. So we did not go so that we weren't adding to the patients.
Distress.
Right.
But do you think we have enough trained people to answer mental health crisis?
I thought the police department, didn't we put somebody?
Yeah, we've got a contract with VOA for that, but I mean, it's not enough.
It's a third of a
So that's kind of what I'm
full-time
talking about with the
employee,
police
yeah,
department
it's
stuff.
not enough.
My staff are trained to some level to provide emotional and crisis training. I'm
Yeah.
state certified in crisis intervention. I took it with Rockland PD years ago. Will honestly say I have not kept up on it as well as I probably should have. But it's been more into the substance abuse areas where we've focused. But my staff does have some basic training in de-escalation and transport of these patients.
And my following question, if I may, do we have people who answer those calls who can adequately, A, understand what type of crisis it is, and 2, properly communicated with you guys? And I just to illustrate, like, you go to a call because somebody's in distress and they've had some kind of an episode. So you think it's a stroke, but you show up and it's a mental health issue that you don't address the same way you address a stroke. So is this because one of the ways I'm thinking of improving patient outcome is better understanding what the situation is as much as possible, so you can provide the level of assistance that's needed. And I'm wondering if there's a gap there that we need to fill.
Well, to be honest, the direction of EMS is actually away from transport.
Right.
Getting more into the community, providing better care in place so that we're taking the load off of an already stressed system, taking somebody to the emergency room in some type of a behavioral health crisis, whatever it may be. May not be the best situation for them because they're not geared for that. They're stressed. Their mental health state may not be geared to what that particular person needs, whereas say a crisis worker or a behavioral health specialist would be better geared for that. So things like community paramedicine. We actually just received a grant to start reinvigorate our community paramedicine program so that we're helping citizens more into the community, keeping them in place, keeping them out of the emergency room, keeping them out of being admitted, to better treat them in place. Because there are certain things that we see it with our Jackman program, where the community, physician's assistant or extender program, where they're being given orders by the physician who has in concert evaluated this patient and said, you know what, a course of antibiotics and they can remain home. That's more where our focus is heading, is actually away from transport, to try and better, to keep these folks in the community, to keep folks move to rural communities for a reason. They don't want to keep coming into the community, into the city or into the hospital and spend a lot of time there if they don't need to. certainly there are cases where they absolutely have to be transported. But, you know, we started doing, most recently, we've started doing blood pressure clinics and getting folks to know their numbers and trying to catch these things before they become a crisis. Getting to know our communities better. I've been working in and around this community for the better part of 23 years. And I cut our teeth at Camden First Aid. So we know these communities, and you know, when I came back to this area, it was like being back home. So trying to keep these folks and really meet the needs of what the citizens need, and in identifying that, trying to gear ourselves to better, you know, behavioral health has really become a big problem, especially since the pandemic. A lot of stress, a lot of unmet needs during that period of time. And a lot of folks did not and still aren't rebounding from that. So trying to find resources for our staff has been a little bit of a challenge, but I think the all hazards approach of being prepared for any situation that you possibly can has been working so far. I haven't had any significant issues where my staff has been attacked or you know, where we haven't been able to de-escalate a patient. There are certain situations, especially with substance abuse, where we do have to sedate in order to be able to transport them to get them to the help that they need. We've seen a number of different models where we've had crisis workers riding with law enforcement. I think you said you had a contract with VOA where you know, we're starting to get these services back into the communities where it desperately is needed, but it's not necessarily transport that they need. You know, the emergency room recently just opened up a specific behavioral health unit in the emergency room, and they staff it when they need to, and you know, it's kind of interesting where we've ended up, where we have a special unit just for behavioral health in the emergency department, which used to be a all hazards, treat everything. And now we have these specialties now popping up in the emergency room because that's the level of crisis that we're at.
Thank you. It was thank you.
Board, anything else, Stephanie?
So yeah, I would really like to know, like, if you didn't have a cap, what would you, probably won't spend a lot of time on this one, but like, what would your building look like? Where would you want your building? I would like to know, like, your big picture, if you could go all out. And then just to kind of see, like, your vision on what it could be, kind of thing. But then I would also like to have a more realistic, like, to go full time, we're going to have the sleeping quarters. You know, what is that going to look like in the next 2 or 3 years? How is that going to be sustainable in the next few years? What different types of plans would you need to have in place? Options on that. Options on, yes, a ambulance here. I can see that happening. For the foreseeable future, while we build our team to have more experience and things like that, you know, what would be your plan to get there, for staffing, for, even if it isn't a full time, but to bring more people in? Because if we get an ambulance, Matt can't be the only paramedic that we have responding to things. You know, so there's just levels of things that need to be implemented, and it's really hard for me to sit here and think about them all myself, because you guys are the ones that are in it every day. So what kind of programs? We've talked about regionalization. Rockport's hiring people, so does that change the plan? Does Lincolnville really want to be on it? Is there a way that we can foster the other communities to get their own licenses, so we don't have to provide the admin and take that type of time? There's other things too, but the most important things to me would be realistic timelines on how we could actually make this happen, based where we are right now, you know, in the next year. I saw that on Facebook, it was put out there that you want to put it in the budget to do these things. I don't really want to hear it on Facebook. I really want to, I mean, oh my goodness, I had like people emailing me, asking me, what is this about? And I was like, I have no idea. Send me what you're talking about. So like, just knowing what your vision is and how we're going to get that there realistically would be super helpful to be able to wrap my head around, because we're going to have to utilize Northeast, or we're going to have to utilize a regionalization plan. We're going to have to utilize, I don't know, somebody threw out Belfast, whatever it is that to get us where we want to go. It's going to have to be small. It's going to have to be incremental. So like, what is the reality of that? I mean, we're never going back to just fire. It's not going to happen. So how are we going to realistically go from where we are to where we need to be with the experienced people that we need on staff to do that? That's really what I would like our next conversation to be, is a realistic plan. And then, if we didn't have any bars holding us back, just a 3-minute, this is our whole building, boom, 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 with a pole down the middle of it.
Those are the best plans.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
Those are the best plans, but they also take an architect to come up with it. We don't have the money to come up with
Well,
those
let's start first with what the service looks like
Right.
and
right.
come back to you with
What could it look like?
options for what that looks like and the staging over time.
That's right. Let's keep it very simple, basic.
Yeah.
It doesn't hurt to say this is a broad range from, the A1 plan to something else, but.
Yeah, it's really a realistic plan
Mhm.
that you see that we could support, because it's an important issue to be able to have these services in our community. And knowing what the constraints are is important. Knowing what your concerns are is, as you mentioned them tonight, that's important to keep that conversation, communication with us too, so that we can support a good 3-year plan that gets us to where we need to be. And at the same time, it's cooperative with our partners. That includes our vendors. It's a very important issue for the town. It's good to put it out there now to say, hey, it's going to be more expensive next year, one way or the other, because regardless of what we do, it's going to be more expensive. How can we get the best bang for the buck? We can't do everything in a year. We probably can't do everything in 2 years. But if we can at least lay it out to then work towards one of those plans, whether it's in the 2015 report or in the 2023 report that's going to come out, we want to be able to support that effectively with good broad-based community support, that they understand what it is and why it is we need to do some upgrades and enhancements to get people the service that they expect. And they probably just think it happens overnight. But I know the stresses that it can put on a family. I lived it too. So I get it. And we want to make sure we're supportive of the community and of all the people working in it.
Thanks, Chris. Allison?
Just quickly, are there things that you feel like you need from us that would be helpful? Is this the kind of situation where you feel like you pretty much know what basically needs to happen, and there sort of is one option or one major price tag, and it's a matter of slowly getting us to the point where we understand the reality? Or do you feel like there are really multiple options with very different price tags and levels of service that you need to hear from the select board or from the community? We really want this or this. I know it's no fun to come and, pitch something to a group of people, not sure if you're going to get shot down or attacked, or like, what would be helpful from us, if anything?
Well, that's a range, right? from making some modifications to the existing building, leaving the police department as it is and building some living space across the street to a whole new building. And on what piece of town property is that going to go on? So that's quite the range.
But not totally. I mean, so I think it's good.
I would like us to not even talk about buildings. Let's
Yeah.
pretend the building issue is not an issue. What we all need to figure out is staffing levels,
Partnerships.
what shifts we're going to be sort of bringing people on for, how many new people that we need if the commitment is to be like a fire-based EMS system.
Do we have
That's-
another option though?
That's certainly.
We do have other
that-
options, but I guess what
that's-
everybody's been trying to make the case for is a fire-based EMS
I
system.
guess that's the question, is if you guys would want to have a fire-based EMS system.
Yes.
Makes sense to me.
Yep. Get us, like I said, get us a structure, a plan, get us a budget, and then get us data to support it. And
And
we're
that's-
willing to.
And what Audrey just said, it's certainly achievable in a fairly quick turnaround time.
We can do
We
that. I
can-
guess, the things that's muddied the waters a little bit is there's got to be a commitment towards working towards that. We're saying that is the model that we feel is going to work best in Camden. What do we need to do to work towards that? I think we've talked about this for years and years and years, and there's lots of, a lot of knowledge about how to do that. And we can talk about staging it so it's not incredibly expensive. I mean,
Is the
I'm not
biggest
gonna just say
barrier
that.
money though, or is it
what
personnel?
makes it
with these
muddier, what makes it a little bit muddier is when it's like, okay, well, how do we make sure that we're bringing along Lincolnville and Hope and Rockport? That makes it a bit muddier when we're doing things like, okay, well, how do we find out what the hospital's doing? And maybe the hospital wants to do an ambulance thing. And that makes it all a lot more confusing when we're talking about different models that aren't a fire-based EMS system that's being run out of Camden for now. Maybe it'll be a regional thing later, but for now we're talking about doing it in Camden. But if we're constantly sort of pivoting to completely different service models with private providers, the hospital system, what have you, that's when it becomes confusing. That's when it becomes muddy. And that's when this conversation just gets mired and we never move anything forward.
Or when we're worried about first saying that our goal is to continue to work with Lincolnville and Hope first
Right.
and achieving this second. Are you asking us to make a commitment?
Lincolnville and
that-
Hope, and I, again, Northeast has been a great partnership. It continues to be a great partnership. But we've got to look at this as a sort of like a transitional thing where we need them for now, but is the goal that we're going to be doing our own thing going forward.
Maybe they'd all like to come and work for us.
I can tell you from our perspective, there's a little bit of things, there's some other things that muddy this up. Personnel is going to be a big issue. If Camden announces they're pulling out, I'm not going to get staff. That's,
What?
I won't be able to attract staff. The 911 contracts are really what kind of hold my division together. My staffing is held strong through all of this. I have plenty of staff. We continue to maintain despite all of the rumors that I closed last Thursday or I plan to close next Thursday. We remain stable and we remain dedicated to these communities and the contracts that we hold. As we move forward, if our call volume decreases, obviously costs are going to increase. We will need to, if we're going to maintain the same level of expectations that we have now. If Camden Fire starts a transitioned transport and you start taking revenue away from that stream, if we're going to remain, we will have to ask for more money. That's just the reality of it. The business is still part of EMS.
Well, I would think, on the other hand, too, if we want still to have the service at a certain level, we would have to expect to pay.
Right.
I wouldn't think that, people shouldn't be surprised that in order to be sustaining.
You would think, but
there's some increased costs.
for some reason, the cost of EMS always seems to catch people by surprise. Because we've come from a largely volunteer system that when you start saying that, no, there is an expense involved with starting an ambulance service, whether it be $6 million, $7 million, $14 million. Everybody's kind of surprised, but it still has an expense. Our daily, each one of our trucks carries roughly $14,000 worth of disposables on it. that probably going to expire, thankfully. But there's a lot of expense with all of that. And that will be one of my concerns is that if we start, because we've already been struggling for years. We've been back and forth with this conversation, as you guys have said, for years. And one thing that my staff always hear is, we'll be gone in a few years. We'll be gone in a few years. That doesn't help morale for us, but it would be something that I mentioned just because it will become a bigger problem for me. If there's no long-term job,
Sure.
I'm not going to be able to attract folks. So that may speed up your timeline is all I'm putting in the back of your head.
Yeah. And I mean, and this is part of how it's so complicated because of that. So if this is the direction you want us to go in, it's a commitment to going in that direction and then picking away at it.
I think we still need to hear
Yeah.
more specifics before we commit, like,
Because I haven't been looking at this, that Camden would just be its own like unit. And that we wouldn't be having the other people, other towns come in, regionalize it, or however. I never looked at it like that so hearing you say that, it kind of just was kind of a, wow, I would need to be convinced a lot more that would be a good way to go.
I mean, I think the goal is to work towards regionalization, but like I was saying before, we can't even begin to have that conversation at the level of service that we're at now with Rockland. We're just not bringing enough to the table that would be realistic for them.
What do you mean by that? Because I thought that the talks were already in place, that we were already kind of had a foundation, whether we just laid down the sand, that we were working on that conversation.
I'd say their expense budget is $2 million a year and ours is like $300,000 a year. That is a huge discrepancy in what we pay for.
So for our Camden
Yep.
EMS, not our contract.
That includes our contract. Yeah.
So at this point, from what I understood, we were talking about moving toward kind of like a dual track where we would be continuing our contract with Northeast and recognizing that's probably going to get more expensive or whatever, and also expanding our capability in a similar way that we've already been doing, where we're increasing our capacity and transitioning as appropriate to more of that burden falling on potentially on Camden staff, not because it doesn't really work if we all just say all of a sudden, starting at a certain date, we're going to say we're going to get all 3 other towns and we're going to pull the plug with Northeast and just launch this new service. That's too scary and challenging for everybody. That you're kind of asking us to understand that no matter what, we're going to be investing more money and investing in a track where ultimately Camden would have the capacity to be, and hopefully with others.
Sure.
But somebody has to start. If we all wait until
Everybody's ready. then-
everybody says, yeah, we're ready to jump off the cliff, nobody wants to do that.
Right.
Everybody wants to watch everybody kind of,
we have to decide if we want to lead this effort
right.
and really.
So, and what I think we're hearing, Tom, you and Art are saying is you'd like to see some budgets about what it looks like for Camden to stand that up, what it could look like with potentially other communities being a part of it, and what it could look like regionally.
It seems like that would help.
Numbers of people and dollars.
Yeah, I'm most concerned about Camden. I'd like to see what it would take for us to lead this effort. I think if we did, the dominoes would fall in a manner that
Well, I think to your
It would
point,
benefit
Chris,
us.
though, I think you've got a good point that you just can't think of solely Camden because there are the other elements that pragmatically are there. The other elements being the other towns, being our vendors and support.
Yeah, I don't think any of us wants to leave anybody behind.
Right, right. That's yeah.
But we can't
What
be
we-
thinking about not doing something just for the benefit of the
No, no,
other
we're not
towns.
saying not-
So it's like a fine, it's kind of a.
It's a prisoner's dilemma. But, no, it is. It is. It's prisoner's dilemma. It's who's going to take the first step and what are we telling? But I think the bottom line for me is that one way or the other, the capacity needs to increase. We're never going to be in a place where we need to decrease capacity. That's not going to happen. So whether the capacity is a mix of Camden increasing the fire department-based EMS with more paramedics, whether it's a partnership with Northeast while we build that capacity up to speed. But realistically, in the 5 to 10 years, we're going to need more healthcare service and more EMS service and more paramedic service, especially in a time where we're shutting down rural hospitals. We're facing a cliff. Yes. Yes.
I'd like to add to that point. If you, it's on. You're going to need firefighters.
Yeah.
Regardless of EMS, you're going to need firefighters, and they should be EMS providers also. But in 5 to 10 years, you're not going to have any firefighters because they're all going to be working for other agencies that do fire EMS and have shifts. And like you stated, Matt's going to have more time to be with his family because he's going to work a 24-hour shift. That's just the way it is because people don't have the time to say, I can work a 12-hour shift. I'm going home with my family. Oh, I got to go. You know, that's just that. I've been on the department 30 years. And back then, everybody worked in town. Everybody left work. Mom stayed at home. Dad went down to the firehouse. All the kids went down to the firehouse when there wasn't a call. Those days are over. It's too bad, but they're not coming back. So it's a personnel game, and it's everywhere. Police department, ambulance, you name it. Small businesses need help. We're in the same boat as everybody else, but we got to try to get ahead of that curve so we're ready when it happens. That's all.
I hadn't thought about the shift part of it very much, about what a big fact, just the hours and then getting called in after that. It's just not
It's the
something
same.
that was on my radar about a model that needed to change. Makes a lot of sense.
But also what I hear, which is, I think, and is that becoming an EMS is an attractive selling point to staying a firefighter, to combining those two competencies together. So we have more chances of attracting firefighters if they also have an EMS capacity, because it makes the job more attractive. Is this what?
Especially here where the fire calls aren't, like Lewiston is fire only.
Right.
It's also Lewiston, it's a bigger area, they get more calls. Here, it's a lot harder to do that. And so when you add the EMS, it makes it more attractive. And then also just like, if we weren't doing EMS and I have an EMS license and I'm not getting that experience at my job, I now have to work a second job to get experience. Whereas if I can just do it all at my job, then I can go home and not have to worry about doing that, if that makes sense.
Well, and we tried to cross that bridge 5 or 6 years ago when we asked for another full-time firefighter so we could have more staffing, and we took on the code. Because we had the times we went and did code enforcement, and some of us still do that. But that was we didn't do EMS. EMS was being provided. What can we do for the town? So we all went and got certified to be code enforcement officers. That has changed because the priority has shifted to EMS. And that's probably the way it should be, because fire departments and EMS go hand in hand. Doesn't mean we can't work with other agencies, but typically your fire guy or your fire person, male or female, is going to do some form of EMS, whether it be basic all the way up to paramedic.
Are the juniors? I'm sorry, I don't know your name. I don't mean to. I wish we had a few minutes to hear. Are you, if becoming an EMS firefighter, would that be a desirable career for you guys? And it's not I don't mean to set you up in any way, but I'm curious to know what the new generation thinks and how you think about those careers.
Into the microphone.
And if you don't want to answer, it's fine too. I don't mean to put you on the spot.
I mean, I'm
I'm
not
curious.
sure. So this is Connor. I'm Bennett. We're both junior firefighters. Connor just turned 16, which makes him eligible to become a basic EMT, and I'm going to be soon 16 in a few months. So it is kind of a cool and desirable thought to become an EMT, kind of work with Camden Fire. I'm not sure if, right now I'm, as many other people, I don't know if I want to like go full time or something like that. So it's interesting because you don't see a lot of people because the pay, it's not up to other departments, and firefighter EMT, it doesn't pay as well as a firefighter paramedic, but also you have to go to a year of schooling or a little less. And there's a lot of factors that play into it, but.
However, your main state retirement is after 20 or is it 25 years? So you could be retiring when you are not even 45.
That is a good, that is a good recruiting pitch. Thank you.
I'm just saying, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah, people don't realize
All right,
that.
It's what every 15, 16-year-old thinks about retirement.
Right.
But you need to
We're-
listen to your parents. when they
We're
tell you
over
that.
2 hours in,
Yeah,
Chief.
sorry.
Last word.
When do you want to get back together?
We have a couple of select board meetings in November. Could you have something together for us by then? No?
Sure.
Okay, we can
Well,
wait.
You want
Let's
to
go
probably,
with either the late November one or December.
Okay, your choice.
is that
Let's
setting you
email.
up better budget wise and thinking about when that plan comes in?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, your choice. Just let me know. We can just do it by email. We don't have to decide now, but it'll be publicly announced. It'll be a select board meeting. Okay,
Thank you very much, everyone.
yeah.
Thank you.
Guys.
Super.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
Thank you for answering.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.